for those who don't know this voice, say your name and what you do.
My name is Derek Allen, and I play music, and I practice law, and I'm a dad, and a friend, and a connoisseur of all things craft.
So, how would you describe the Stump Mutts to someone that doesn't know what you're all about, sound-wise, attitude-wise, the intent?
Sure. I think that I start with we're all original material. We make it a point of doing that, and we don't try to shy away from our backgrounds. And folks compare us to different things, but you'll hear our influences. I grew up as a skateboard kid in the mid 80s, and so I'm going to have those kinds of influences, but I was always a connoisseur of old school rock and roll from the 60s, so lots of Stones. Neil, our lead singer, who's another one of the writers, he's definitely a grunge and post-grunge guy. And
how old are you?
46.
So that means that you literally, I guess, I always say you come online, like when you start realizing what music is.
Mm-hmm.
That means you came online at the tail end of real good rock and roll, at the beginning of punk and new wave.
I'm going to say 1983 I came online.
So that's when that line was. Disco was gone,
Mm-hmm.
punk and new wave were hanging around, but rock and roll was starting to creep back in.
Sure, that's right. So,
especially the underground stuff.
I'll give you my first three concerts were on my birthdays in 1982, 83, 84. 1982 in Greensboro was the Styx. Styx Kilroy here in Greensboro. The next year was Police Synchronicity, 1983. And then 1984 was 1984, Van Halen.
So you're talking harmony, musicianship, and then stage presence with
Sure.
those three bands.
Well, and less so with Police with stage presence, but that stage presence is definitely something.
Stage presence with Van Halen.
Absolutely.
Musicianship with the Police, and harmony and kind of that...
show. Well, the Styx put on a
yeah.
show. Styx may be the best show I've ever seen in terms of a show.
Like
It was
light
theater.
show?
It was all theater.
Pure theater.
It was pure theater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you have a very successful gig as a lawyer for 90 breweries?
Yeah, a little bit more than that, but yeah, a lot of breweries, over 90 of those, and distilleries and wineries and lots of things. Alcohol.
Well, with that said, I mean that is above and beyond a full-time gig. You're talking way over 40 hours a week. But why is there that urge to play music on top of all that? Is that the counterbalance to what you do for work? Is having that outlet?
Sure, one's a vocation, the other one is an avocation. That's the drive. Neil is a banker, and our drummer is a nurse, and our bass player is a sign executive. We're all professionals in our real world, and then we get to come out and do the stuff that we wish we were doing 24/7.
What's the timeline with the Stump Mutts? Like, when did this all come together? Have you been there the whole time?
No. Neil had there's a project he was doing that he called the Stump Mutts. It was just him, and Neil's probably the best drummer of the band. He's probably the best guitarist in the band, probably the best bass player in the band, the best singer in the band. And he had all the stuff that he was doing, and he was recording my band, and he was a client of mine in our real world jobs as banker, and I was his lawyer. And we got to talking about music during mediation one time, and he played some music for me, and I played some music for him, and next thing we know, we're talking about his canned one-man music band project becoming a real thing and a stage show presence. And he asked me if I had any bass or drummer guys, and we put together Patrick and John, and next thing you know, we had a band. And,
when was this?
3 years ago.
So, what was the intent with it? Just to kind of like weekend warrior it, or because now it's a thing.
Yeah, the original
where it is now, was that the intent?
The original intent was to play his songs that he had done only in the studio live.
Okay.
And the first time we got together, I like to write songs. we had started putting together this thing, and we ended up writing a song the first time we're together as a band. And they're like, you know what, we should probably write some more songs. But we're playing his music at that time. Then we started to write some songs. We put out an EP 2 years ago, and we said, you know what, we should write some more songs. And that's what...
So it just kept going.
Yeah, and that's what Love Hate is. So that's our 13 songs that came out of, and a very intentional songwriting mission. We went to the beach for a week, and all we were doing was writing songs.
So, for you, just a little background, where does your starting point with being a musician happen there? Have you always played?
I played since high school.
Guitar?
Guitar since high school. My mom was pianist and organist in our church. She played a black church. There's a lot of music, a lot of good music in our house. Always a lot of good music in our house. I grew up with a lot of Motown, a lot of shag music, a lot of nice backbeat driving stuff.
Yeah, backbeat 3-minute songs, the 2.5-minute radio hits.
Yep. So that's kind of where I grew up, and I got to really get into music, as I said, when I was coming 12, 13, and in a skateboard scene.
Winston-Salem?
Greensboro.
Greensboro.
Mm-hmm.
So you went to school in Winston-Salem?
No,
No, you went to school at UNCA.
UNC Asheville's where I went to school. But before that, my mom worked at the university, UNCG in Greensboro.
Okay.
So in Greensboro, Tate Street was kind of the scene there, and I'd spent a lot of time at the pool hall there, and I still remember the first time I walked into the pool hall, and I was
Sounds
probably,
like Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Really was. I was 13, 14 maybe. I walked into this pool hall, and it's like the beginning of should I stay or should I go? So as soon as I walked into the door,
It's almost like out of a movie.
it was that first thing of da, na, 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 and I just remember going, this is what it's about.
So you got into the skateboarding scene. So, I mean, that was a pretty iconic era in the quote unquote American teenager. Was that iconic early mid '80s skateboarder?
Sure.
And
I'd been in the kind of the skateboard thing since I was kind of a little kid. So I was in it like from 7 on, and so when they got to the bigger boards, the Bones Brigade era, and Lance Mountain and Tony Hawk and Steve Caballero and Rodney Mullen and those guys, I'd been skating at that time for 5 or 6 years, and those guys were 5 years older than me, and it was really cool. And they brought with them this awesome California punk rock scene, and then from that I kind of melded into the D.C. punk rock scene,
which was in the mid to late '80s the mecca.
That's right.
Fugazi and everybody else. I mean,
That's
there was
right.
a million bands in that city at that time.
So there's this thing, USA Night Flights.
Discord Records.
That's right. And before Discord Records, I was on to this band called Social Distortion, because I had seen...
I saw them on Friday.
Yes, I had seen this thing on Night Flights called Another State of Mind. And it was a stupid documentary about this band from California called Social Distortion. They're touring across the country in this crappy van, and I was completely blown away and mesmerized by that scene and in that music. And in that, they end up meeting up with the Minor Threat guys when they get to D.C. So if you haven't seen it, I own it. I'll let you borrow it.
Well, what's interesting about that whole D.C. thing was that if you really want to get down to the brass tacks of it, it kind of almost prefaced the grunge movement, because a lot of those bands in Seattle, the only time they were taken seriously outside of Seattle was in D.C.
That's right.
Dave Grohl was in D.C. bands before he was in Nirvana. He was bouncing around D.C.
Well, in the
Dinosaur Jr., all those guys.
And the thing that I like about all of that stuff is that it's all authentic. And one of the things you've hung around me, you've heard me say this a million times. Real knows real, and that's kind of where it is. So you don't shy away from where you're from or what you're about, and you play the music. And so in Asheville, in particular, there's a bunch of indie stuff. There's a bunch of funk stuff. There's a bunch of bluegrass stuff, and those all have their pieces, but we don't try to be any of that. And I love it when my friends that are in those bands are like, look, you guys are the only band that are doing this.
There's not a lot of lo-fi bands in Asheville.
No.
Nobody. I mean, at least that have stuck around. It's in a good way, though. There's a lot of bluegrass, there's a lot of funk, There's a lot of Americana, but that's what we love about this place. There's also a lot of jazz. But in terms of rock and roll, there's not too many local rock and roll bands.
That's
original.
It. Yeah.
A lot of tribute bands, but not too many original ones.
Yeah, and every once in a while we'll play a cover, but we try to stay away from it, and we do it. We try to play, ironic covers.
What do you like about the lo-fi sound? I mean, when I listen to that record, it feels like it could have been dropped in 1989.
It's awesome. Someone else recently said, you guys sound like classic college rock, and to me that was a huge compliment, because to me that's the stuff that I want to hear. I want to hear the stuff that's got some scratches on it, some nicks on it, that sounds authentic, that sounds a little beat
Flawed
up.
beauty, in a good way.
That's it. That's right.
Yeah. So then, when you approach that sound, what is that? I guess what I'm trying to get to is, when you play a sound like that, it must, no pun intended, strike a chord with a different chord with the audiences in Asheville, because there's not a sound like that around here, but they remember that sound.
They either remember it, or we're finding this success and this tone, again, with your pun, that's striking a chord with a high school or younger set that are tuned into Nirvana and Soundgarden and Stone Temple Pilots and Pearl Jam and Mother Love Bone and all these bands that are definitely influences on us, because we grew up with that stuff in college. But these high school kids and early college kids are into that sound because of them. It's nostalgic, and they feel like they know it. That's so
weird. The bands that I grew up with are now classic rock.
Yeah, and so their parents are coming to me and telling me, hey, I had no idea that you were in this band. My kid loves this band. It's huge in their high school. And that blows me away. That blows me away.
What is it about being in a band that you see any similarities with what you do as a lawyer?
We're always telling a story, and not in a negative way, manipulating the person that's listening to what you're telling them. And we do that as a band, and I do that in my job. I'm always thinking about what the audience is and how they're going to interpret it, and knowing that there's going to be multiple audiences for any message, and being able to layer onto that the meaning of what you're trying to put out there and to convey. And some people listen to the lyrics, and some people listen to the melody, some people listen to the backbeat, some people are all up on the guitars, and knowing that you're talking to a bunch of different people at the same time and conveying a bunch of different messages, and it's very intentional. It's very similar to what I do in my real
Well,
life.
I was going to say, it's like, I don't know if this is just me just spouting off, but do you ever see the idea of constructing a case as constructing a song?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it, it starts with, when I have a big project, it's a big case, a big problem. That's normally what I get, is a big problem. I start with a theme, and the theme in music might be the hook. Yeah. It might be one line. It might be one word.
Yeah,
it might be just one idea.
How do I get to the outcome?
That's right. And then you build things around that, and you build your case or your song around, your one theme.
What's the hope with what the Stump Mutts are doing? I mean, I know you all are very busy. You have all very busy gigs, but at the same time, there's always, it appears, at least to me, there's always time that is put aside purposely for the band. What do you see now with the album out, the place of the band in Asheville, but also what's next?
I don't know. We like to play great shows, and for us to play a show is to really put it on. We're not just going to get up and just go through the motions or just play the song. That's the Mutts. That's not what we want to do. And there's been a lot of that music in the last 15 years, 20 years. But we want to put on our show. We want to put on a rock and roll show. We want people to come away and be blown away and say, man, that was a great show. And to put on a great show, you've got to be pretty intentional about how you market it, when you're going to play, where you're going to play, who you're going to have supporting, and come out and throw it down.